Hi, and welcome to my tutorial on how to make first-person animations in Blender. It's aimed at beginners, but regardless of your skill level, you might learn something. First, download Blender. You can download it via their website, Steam, or provided you have a computer running Windows, the Microsoft Store. For this tutorial, I'll be using Blender version 2.83 LTS, but most things should be similar in future builds, such as 2.9. By default, in Blender versions 2.8 and above, left-click selects, G drags, S scales, R rotates according to camera position, and pressing R again freestyle rotates, like a trackball. Right-clicking during any of these will cancel the transformation. If you'd like to access the Transforms menu, you can press T to toggle the sidebar or press Shift Space and select one. The Transforms are selection box, which allows you to select things and tweak them easily, 3D cursor, which lets you set the 3D cursor, as well as move, rotate, and scale. Transform allows you to see all the transforms at once. Also keep in mind that A selects everything, while Alt-A deselects everything. For the camera, middle mouse button rotates, middle mouse button plus shift pans, and scroll wheel zooms in and out. On the numpad, 5 toggles between perspective and orthographic view, 3 is for side view, and 7 is for top view. If you don't have a numpad, go to Preferences, Input, and turn on Emulate Numpad. I'll go over other hotkeys as they come up. If you get confused, screencast keys will always be in the bottom left. For rigs tailored to first-person animation, GameBanana is a good place to look. I also have a repository of rigs linked in the description, which have all been ported to work properly with Blender versions 2.8 and onwards. For weapon models, some good places to look are GameBanana, Sketchfab, TurboSquid, although most models will cost money, P3DM, although a lot of models have questionable textures and vertex grouping, and ArtStation, although only some are downloadable. Model Haven used to have good weapon models as well, but as of this recording, they've been removed. This could always change though. As always, it's important to give credit to the authors if you're going to be using their work. If you're making this for a game or other commercial purpose, be sure to check the licensing or ask the author, because most of the time, you're not allowed to. First go to File, Import, and then choose the file extension that your model is formatted in. Mine is an FBX, so I'll select that, find the model, and click Import. Next, if your model has multiple meshes, like mine, you should unify them. You can have multiple meshes if you need to, but if you don't, it will ultimately just worsen performance. To merge, select one mesh, hold Shift, and start selecting the other ones. Press Ctrl-J to join them. Hold Z and select wireframe mode to make sure you have everything. If you miss something, you can just repeat the process. Now we need to assign vertex groups. You need one for every part of the weapon you want to move. First, make sure the model is selected, and go into Edit mode by pressing Tab. I like to use face selection, so I'll switch to that in the top left. Go to the Object Data tab, create a new vertex group, and name it Weapon. Make sure everything is selected, click Assign, then deselect everything. Press L while hovering over the model to start selecting parts, then assign them to their own vertex groups. I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to watch through all of it, but once again, use this method to select all the parts you want to rig. This process can be a problem with some P3DM and otherwise ripped models, as sometimes the vertex welding is poor or missing entirely. Once you're done, make sure everything is deselected, select all the vertex groups other than the main one, then click Remove with the main weapon group highlighted. This will prevent problems when rigging. Now we need to apply textures. A basic PBR setup will include several maps. First, there's base color, also known as albedo, which is just the base texture of the model. Alternatively, your model could have a diffuse map, which is a base color with some lighting already baked into the image. Next in a PBR setup are metallic and roughness, which determine how reflective the material is. Some setups include specular and gloss instead, which are similar. Next are normal and ambient occlusion maps, which are used to fake the lighting for extra detail, adding in bumps and dark spots where light is hard to reach. You could also have a combination of any of the maps listed. Now to actually apply those textures. With your model selected, open the Material Properties panel and replace any materials to ensure the shaders are set up correctly for Blender. Next, select the shading layout. To import a texture, just drag it in. If you can't, press Shift-A and search for Image Texture, then click Open and import your texture that way. First, import your base color or diffuse, then connect it here. If you also have an ambient occlusion map, import that and then add a MixRGB node. Drag the color map into color 1 and the ambient occlusion map into color 2. The order does matter. Then set the mode to multiply and turn the factor value up until you're happy with the result. Now import any reflective maps you might have and set them all to non-color data, unless you have a specular map with color. If they have apparent inputs on the shader, drag them in like normal. However, if you have a gloss map instead of a roughness map, run it from an invert node to the roughness channel. Finally, we can add our normal map. Search for normal map, then drag it into the normal node on your shader. If you already have one, don't worry about it. Then drag in your normal map texture and set it to non-colored data. Check the normal by disconnecting the base color node. If it looks a bit off around the vertical edges, you can try adding a separate RGB node, a combine RGB node, and an invert node. We'll drag the red and blue values over and then pass the green through the invert node. Once you're done, reconnect your base color. Finally, save the blend file and open your rig. Next, it's time to rig the model. Go to File, Append, and find the blend file you just saved. Open it, go to Object, and choose your model. If Auto Key is on, make sure to turn it off here before you move the model roughly to where you want it. Next, go to the Modifiers tab and add an Armature modifier. Select the rig and make sure Preserve Volume is enabled. Select a bone on the already existing armature. Press Tab to go into Edit mode, enable Cursor Selection, and click on your weapon model to set your cursor. Then press Shift-A to make a bone, followed by S and Ctrl-Shift-S to scale it. This will be the main weapon bone, so move it where you want the whole model to pivot. Then, go to the Bone Properties tab and rename it to the exact name of the vertex group you'd like it to control. Make sure to key each bone as you go along, so they show up on the action editor. You can do this by pressing Tab to exit edit mode, then, with the bone selected, press I in the viewport and click Lock Rat Scale. Now we'll do the same for the other bones, starting with the magazine. You can use Ctrl-D to duplicate the main bone, or just Ctrl-A to make a new one. Don't parent the magazine to anything, as we'll set up constraints for it later. Key it and keep going. A few things to note. If you have bullets, make sure to parent them to the magazine. If you have a charging handle, parent it to the weapon. Then parent the bolt to the charging handle so they move with each other. Once you're done and the weapon is rigged, go to the hierarchy and click the cursor icon next to your mesh so you don't accidentally select it. Also, make sure to re-enable auto key. Before starting with the pose, we need to constrain the magazine to the weapon in case you need to resize or move the model during posing. Select the weapon bone, then the magazine bone, press Ctrl-Shift-C, and select Child of Constraint. Go to the Bone Constraint tab, click Set Inverse, and press I while hovering over the influence value to key it. Now it's time to go through posing. For this step, it's important to just use lots of reference material and tweak it to your liking. You'll get better at this over time, but here are a few tips. We'll start with the left hand in a normal pose. I like to rotate the wrist at this sort of angle. That way the weapon is held by the palm, not the fingers. For the thumb, it really depends on the weapon, but I like to angle it down a bit, so that it's sort of in line with the barrel. The other fingers can just sort of support the grip, but it doesn't matter too much as you shouldn't be able to see them anyway. For the left hand on a vertical grip position, just make sure the hand makes sense. You don't want to have the cavity between the thumb and index finger look weird, so make sure the hand is right up against the grip. Also, the thumb should go over the other fingers, otherwise it'll look weird. You won't see most of this from first person, but it's always good practice. The right hand is similar to the vertical grip. Make sure the cavity between the index finger and thumb is filled by the pistol grip, and make sure that the thumb is over the bottom 3 fingers. For the trigger finger, I like to angle the bottom pin out a bit, then point it back in with the top 2. This is a more realistic pose and makes it easier to animate. Pistol posing is a bit different. Just use lots of reference material, and after a few animations, you should get the hang of it. Next, we'll take care of the constraints for the hands. It's the same process as earlier for the magazine. Select the weapon bone, then the right hand, Ctrl-Shift-C, Child of Constraint, Set Inverse, Key Influence. Same thing for the left hand as well, except for instead of the main weapon bone, select the magazine bone, then the left hand. Most people parent the left hand to the magazine because it helps for mag out animations. In addition, the magazine is connected to the weapon anyway, so moving the main bone will move everything. Finally, we can tweak the origin a bit. A good rule of thumb for this is to line the top or barrel of your weapon up with a line going from the bottom right of the viewport to the crosshair. You can turn this line on by selecting the camera, going to the Camera Properties tab, opening the Viewport Display and Composition Guides tabs, and then enabling Center Diagonal. You can always tweak it a bit from there though. I also like to rotate the weapon a bit. It's more interesting that way. Don't overdo it though, otherwise the barrel won't line up with the crosshair and it'll just look weird. Now it's time to begin animating. I'd like to mention that for this tutorial, I'll be animating in 60 FPS. A lot of rigs, including mine, are set to 30 FPS by default. That's because most people animate in 30 and then interpolate to 60. I recommend you try both, but keep in mind the frame timings I use in this tutorial will be for 60. With that in mind, we'll start with the draw animation. Go down to the action editor, click the new action button, and rename it to draw. What I usually do for draws is to move the summary keyframe over a bit, then take the main weapon bone and move it down. What we're doing here is making the holstered pose, so try to make it where the weapon would actually come from, not some random location. Now we have 2 poses, holstered and drawn. But as it is, this is really linear. Open the main weapon keyframe to view all the axes values. Now it's just a matter of adding a few more keyframes to vary the motions. You can try using the graph editor for this, but I wouldn't recommend it until you've done a few animations without it. After varying it with more keyframes, we should be ready to move on to the next animation. Next, we'll make a fire animation. Once again, go down to the action editor, make a new action, and rename it to fire. Then duplicate the start keyframe. For recoil, I like to go to the side view first, which you can once again do by pressing 3 on your numpad. Then I usually rotate the pitch down, then quickly up over the base pose, then down under before the last keyframe. This doesn't look so great, so we'll follow a similar process as the draw to add more variation on the other axes. Make sure to adapt this technique for the type of weapon you're animating. Depending on the type of ammunition being fired and the size of the weapon, you should add varying amounts of force. It helps to look at reference videos. I think this looks decent for an MP7 in this configuration, so we'll move on to the next animation. Finally, for the animation portion, I'll just give tips for the reload. A reload typically consists of 2 to 3 main poses: the mag out, the mag in, and if you want, a bolt pull or release. There are lots of ways to do this. You can animate the weapon first, then the hands. You could make the key poses and then add detail, or just do everything as you go. If you want to key the constraints, for instance on a mag throw where the movement of the magazine needs to be independent from the movement of the weapon, the easiest way to do it, though tedious, is to key the bone, then the influence at 1, set it to 0 on the next frame, and then move the bone back as accurately as possible. You have to do it like this because as of this recording, Blender hasn't had a single version in which the constraints act normally, like in other programs. Next is time to render, if you'd like to. Go into the Output Properties tab and set where you'd like the video file to end up. Change the file format to FFmpeg video, and then drop down the encoding tab. Set the container to MPEG-4 and the video codec to H.264. You're now ready to render. To render a viewport animation, go to the bottom of the viewport you'd like to render, click on View, and select Viewport Render Animation. To render your animation normally, press Ctrl F12. To export to FBX, go to File, Export, and choose FBX. Scroll down, make sure the Bake Animation box is checked, and expand the drop-down menu. Sampling rate is how often it will export frames. The lower, the finer the export quality will be. Simplifying is similar. Turning it down will simplify it less, meaning that if you want a lossless export, turn both values down as far as they go. Keep in mind that the lower you set these values, the longer it will take to export. Finally, change any other settings you need to, set your output path, and click Export FBX. My advice for next steps is just to keep practicing. That's how you improve. It also helps to experiment with different styles, techniques, and assets. Feedback can be helpful as well, so I recommend joining an animation community. If an animation comes out poorly, just move on to the next one and remember that it takes time to improve. In addition, you should always take breaks. If you don't, you could experience burnout. Thanks for watching.